Observe.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Entertaining motions to approve our regular agenda.
I would so move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the regular agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed. Thank you, gentlemen. Approval of the consent agenda, please.
I would also so move.
Do I have a second?
So you got a second.
Second.
And all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. We'll move on to staff agenda items. City Engineer Brad Reefstick is not here. He has no action items. Jennifer Haskamp, we're going to move right into probably the largest thing on our agenda, which is a consideration of resolution number 2019-14, the minor subdivision. Jennifer, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Before you this evening, we have a request for a minor subdivision. Obviously, sometimes these come straight to you, sometimes they go through the planning commission, so I'll highlight exactly how we got here and why it is coming directly to you in just a moment, and also give a highlight of the application. So this evening, what we're looking at is a proposed lot line rearrangement, or as it's classified within our ordinance as essentially an exchange of lands, which is a subsection of the minor subdivision section. The properties that are affected by the proposed request are located at 11033 66th Street North, which is defined as Lot 3. It is part of a platted subdivision, and 6353 Lake Elmo Avenue North, which is Lot 5 in the same subdivision. The land use and zoning are guided and zoned A1. The subject properties in their current configuration are approximately 8.51 acres and 12.41 acres. And the proposed subdivision essentially takes 2 acres from the larger parcel and gives it to the smaller parcel. That's a pretty easy, quick, and dirty way to explain it. Essentially, we end up with 2 10-acre parcels plus some change. So, as I said, sometimes these come straight to you, sometimes they go through the planning commission. No matter what, when we have a minor subdivision process per the code, we have a public hearing. So whether or not that public hearing is held at the planning commission or the city council depends on the complexity of the application that we're looking at. When it comes to this proposal tonight, it's fairly straightforward and pretty easy. We're not creating any new lots. The lots that are created are not new building entitlements. There's no principal structure. So from that respect, it's pretty straightforward. The portion of land that's being transferred or exchanged is essentially a piece of property that is landlocked. It has no frontage, so there's no possibility that it would create some kind of new building entitlement from a principal structure perspective. So based on all of that, that is why it's in front of you this evening, as opposed to going through a much longer, more extensive process through the Planning Commission. Section 30-11, subsection B of our subdivision ordinance permits some sections of the minor subdivision process to be essentially bypassed in the event of very simple, straightforward requests. So in this case, we are required to have a certificate of survey, which is provided in your packet this evening, and it demonstrates exactly what's being requested. And that is pretty much why we're here. So we have noticed a public hearing for this evening. I suspect that's why we might have some residents in the audience tonight. And there is no other public hearing with respect to this application, so you're it. In terms of the existing site conditions, this aerial highlights exactly where the properties are. So one of the properties, the property that is going to have the 2 acres added to, is oriented north-south. The one to the south is oriented east-west. There's a 2-acre portion of property that is adjacent to that southerly property line that would be added to and combined with the existing lot number 3. The only complex part about this, and I would say it's not even that complex, but there are existing drainage and utility easements that were identified and were dedicated as part of the original plat. So when the Bear subdivision was platted back in the day, there were drainage and utility easements that got placed on the lot lines, which is what is required within our subdivision code. So as a result of that, now those drainage and utility easements would not run on lot lines and would be somewhat awkward. So that's the only part that I think needs to be cleaned up a little bit in terms of if you were to grant this minor subdivision tonight. Those drainage and utility easements don't make a lot of sense and would need to be corrected in order for them to make sense. As identified in your packets this evening, there are existing principal structures on both parcels at this time, and there is an existing accessory building that's also on the property that is going to have the 2 acres that would be added to it. In terms of the survey, this identifies exactly what the configuration looks like. This, I believe, was provided in your packets this evening. The 2 acre portion, if my cursor does not show up, but if it did, it's that strange, basically that little strip of land, if you will, that's on the southerly lot line of lot number 3. So that's where the 2 acre portion is. It's approximately 100 feet wide, then extends to the easterly property line, and that 2 acre portion would then be combined with the property that's known as lot number 3. The zoning and dimensional standards, which is standard within our packets for our review process. Both parcels actually meet our existing lot standards, the existing principal structures, the minimum 5 acres, lot width, lot depth, etc. They all meet. So in terms of our frontage and lot width and lot depth, everything still complies after the transfer, and they comply today. The setbacks are the only piece that are a little bit, there's one setback in particular where the existing principal structure does not actually meet the side yard setback, which is on the southerly lot line of lot number 5. It encroaches by approximately 1.1 feet based on the certificate of survey. If you look at our code, it's a little bit, it's a little bit complicated from the standpoint of the intent is obviously that we're not increasing or making the nonconformity a bigger issue or worse. In this case, what's proposed to be transferred is actually on the north side, so that northerly setback, side yard setback, would still comply. In fact, exceeds it by a substantial amount. The subdivision doesn't increase or affect the existing nonconformity at all. So from that standpoint, staff believes that what's being requested meets the intent of our ordinance. The intent really being that we're not making nonconforming uses worse. So from that perspective, if you look at it from that analysis, the remaining everything else on the property meets all of our existing lot standards, setback standards, etc. Lastly, I would point out that from a accessory building perspective, our ordinance is tied to the lot sizes. So obviously we're going to have new lot sizes that are associated with both parcels. So both property owners need to be aware of the fact that the accessory building standards, if they were to build something in the future, must comply with these standards and are based on the new lot sizes. The existing accessory buildings that are on lot number 3 comply with the standards. There's approximately 2,900 square feet plus or minus. And based on our ordinance, they would be permitted, I believe it's another 800 square feet or something like that. So it still complies with respect to section 32-313. Just to highlight a couple of the other pieces that we typically look at when we're looking at a minor subdivision, because most of them are actually not applicable, but in the interest of being consistent, there's no new access that's being proposed as a result of the subdivision. There's no new driveways or anything else that's being proposed to access that area that's being combined or proposed to be combined. The area that is exchanged does not create a new lot. There's no new building entitlements as a result of it, or principal building entitlements, I should say. With this application, there are no accessory buildings, no other improvements structurally that are being proposed as part of it. So this is simply the transfer of 2 acres. From what we were told, it sounds like the 2 acres of transfer is really related to wanting the keeping of horses or more horses. And that is the primary purpose of the transfer. As staff noted, the drainage and utility easements should be cleaned up to match the proposed lot lines, so that essentially what would happen right now is the drainage and utility easement would run straight through the middle of the transfer area. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense from that perspective. The draft conditions are provided in the resolution, which is in your packet tonight, which is 2019-14. I would like to note that actually the second bullet or the second condition that staff proposes in there is actually, unfortunately, it was two conditions that were combined from an old staff report and an old resolution. The driveway access permits are granted by the city, they're not the county, so if we could just correct that condition, it's that any new access to either lot would require our building officials review and our driveway permit as opposed to a county permit. So that is the only correction I would note. I caught it when I was putting my presentation together, and that is all I have, so I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Gentlemen?
Yeah, I mean, Jennifer laid it out pretty well. We didn't create any non-conforming uses. The buildings all fit, which is a big problem when you're doing a lot split like, or addition, lot line change like this. Basically the lots now are closer to our 10-acre, density, so that kind of goes more towards conforming than less conforming. The tag, well, I call it a tag lot, kind of how it goes out, is a little odd, but it's linear, every straight lines, and that's what our ordinance requires. It's not like we don't have those other places in Grant. And, and it's a residence, and they want to work together to do this, and I think that's something we should do for our residents when they come forward with a reasonable request. So I'm fine with this, so. No questions.
John?
No questions.
Jeff? Okay, makes sense. The nonconformity that Jennifer has identified with the southernmost Lot 5 home is not exacerbated, as Jennifer has said. We're not changing any of that. We're not making any of that worse. We're good there. The only question I have for you, Jennifer, is on the drainage easement across the southerly line of Lot 3. Is that just going to be jogged outside then of that line of the 2-acre slot piece then, or how is that handled? For
So
the
it would
Lot
be
5?
it would be shifted essentially. So you have to vacate it technically, but you vacate it and then you reestablish it on the new lot line. So it would essentially run along the new southern boundary.
Okay.
Is essentially what would happen.
Okay, it would come down.
Yep.
And the expense for vacating and then reestablishing that would come out of an escrow account from?
Right, so staff has suggested that they update the survey, the certificate of survey
Saw that.
that was provided. That's where they can shift that drainage and utility easement. The DNU is purely for the benefit of the city, so it's not something that is to the public, essentially, like a roadway is. So essentially, we can take care of it by them updating the survey and then having the new information provided on it, and then with the deeds. So there's not a whole lot. They do have to go back and get their surveyor to update the information just so that we can record it in the proper location, but beyond that.
Yeah. Overall, this is just a pretty simple thing. We do have, as Tom did mention, a little bit of a different lot size here, but linear, right angle is just the way we want it. 2 willing participants, exchanging 2 acres in order to accomplish a goal. What more could be said? In just one moment. Yep. Oh no. You're good. We're gonna have you up for a public hearing here, and then we can chat about a little bit about some of the questions and stuff. Kim, it's been a while since I did a public hearing. Do you want to vote to open that, or?
I would like a motion and a second and a vote, please.
Motion and a second to open our public hearing. Do I hear my first motion?
I will move that we open the public hearing.
And a second.
I'll second.
Very good. All those in favor of opening this public hearing on our proposed lot split signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed? No. If you'd come up, and whoever would like to discuss it, come on up and sign into our sign-in sheet and just kind of identify yourself so we know who we're talking to. So who's ever like to come up? Yeah, if you would, please.
She's not in the way.
I have no knowledge of that. I plead ignorance.
So we are the previous owners of 11033.
Okay, and what's your name, ma'am?
Sue Lund.
Oh, hi,
I'm
Sue.
sorry.
Okay.
And love the property, they've done great, whatever. So I guess my question is, we conform to all the rules of Grant as far as horses, building, whatever. So with this additional 2 acres, and I think I was listening, I was trying, so they can't, are they allowed to add more buildings and/or horses and/or any changes to the structure getting 2 more acres?
That is a great question that I'm going to defer back to our planner real quick.
Sure.
And the structures, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to that, but the professional here is going to enlighten us.
So the answer is yes. So our threshold, I believe, starts at 9.6, if my memory serves me. So right now it's 8.51 acres. So by adding the additional 2 acres, it goes into the next category of accessory structures and buildings. So essentially, per the ordinance, you get 1 more accessory building. So I believe it's up to 4. It's 3 or 4. I'd have to look.
I think it's 4.
I think it's 4 though, and I believe it goes up to 3,500 square feet combined. So there is a slight difference. I think it's about an extra 1,000 square feet that you're permitted plus an extra building.
So it's
So
square footage
it's-
in addition to the, I mean, you
It's
could have 1 building or 2, but it's square footage.
it's both. So that you can't exceed 4 buildings and you can't exceed 3,500 square feet combined in all those buildings. So both of those, so to calculate that, you use the existing square footage of the existing buildings that are out there. And then that identifies what's remaining in terms of what they could still build. And that could be split between 1 or 2 buildings, because I believe there are 2 buildings out there right now. So
And-
as far as horses, the answer is not entirely black and white. Because we have to do the grazable acres calculation. So the extra 2 acres theoretically could add an additional, depending on how much grazable acres you're looking at. So it requires a little bit more analysis to determine that. That's not part of this application in particular, but it could be. So,
Yes, and thank you. That's exactly right. There's more analysis needed, especially for the grazable acres analysis. The buildings are a little more cut and dried. Once you hit that threshold, that 10 acres, you are entitled to that additional buildings, in this case, 2 additional buildings, and up to that 3,500 square foot threshold added together. But the horses becomes a little stickier question to answer, and that's something that the homeowners at some point may wish to pursue themselves, and that would require a little bit different analysis. Does that make sense?
It does,
Okay.
yes. Okay, thank you.
Fantastic. Hopefully answered your question.
Yes, you did, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else, please? Public hearing, ma'am? Please sign in and then tell us your name.
Oh, you guys know it. It's Mary Michaels.
Couldn't remember.
Not my wife.
I'm your darling next door neighbor.
Saying that.
Again, plead ignorance. Where that going?
Okay, I am Mary Michaels. I live, this property will, I just found out, be all behind my house. And I really like looking out my 10 acres. I'm just wondering, are you gonna clear cut all that? Or is it still gonna be a buffer? Is it gonna be a fence, or?
Mary,
Because it's,
Mary, could you do us a favor and just kind of orient us? Whereabouts are
Can you
you?
bring it up on the
Yeah, could you orient us a little bit?
overhead?
I don't know how to find
And-
it.
Can we go
Here,
back to
how
it?
about,
Help me out here.
how about we go this way?
So where the new piece is, I just found this out, is all gonna be right behind my house.
So you're the property directly to the east.
To the east?
And my husband's not here, and
Okay.
he is really smart about this, cause he's a home builder.
Okay.
So, I think he'd be really concerned. I have now horses on the one side of me, and then I'm gonna have them in the back. And I'm not gonna lie, it's been 100 degrees a couple days, 90s. I mean, you guys all know, you've all had horses. The smell is, when I'm back there, it's not that great, but, So I'm just gonna say, I'm concerned.
Okay. Well, Mary, here's the thing, and let me at least answer your concerns from a council or at least a mayor perspective. I can't speak for the council. Can speak for myself. This is something, I'm glad that you brought it up. I'm glad that you're talking to your neighbors about it. But all we can do, as you well know, is we can look at the legality of the situation. We can look at the development rules and the rules as presented by both our planning staff and our legal staff. And at that point, we have very black and white decisions to make. And when I look at this, it fits into everything, and again, I'm not speaking for the council, I'm speaking for myself. It fits into everything that we're trying to achieve in terms of 2 willing participants adding acreage to their homestead. So you bring up certainly a valid consideration, and a consideration that's very important from your perspective, both value and enjoyment of the property. Don't disagree with you a bit, but it's something that from our perspective, it's something that, or at least from my perspective, you need to take up with the Mulgrins, as I
Right.
understand. So,
And I'm also looking, someday I'm gonna resell my home.
Right.
I gotta look about that too.
yeah, nope, and your perspective and your concerns are well noted. But again, when we're doing these, where our powers and our ability to change much it just isn't inherent within the power that we
This
hold.
was the first we've seen of how that was gonna go.
Okay.
Brad and I
Okay.
were wondering if it was gonna go behind both of our houses, and
Sure.
it's behind mine,
Yeah,
so.
yep, all right. Mrs. Michaels, thank you very much for telling us. Sir, please. And if you would sign in for us, sir, and then introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jeff Lund. I used to own that house. So I did live with her. I've got 3 questions this evening. First of all, if we're changing the drainage easement, is the setback determined from the edge of the easement or the edge of the property line? Because you said we're 1 foot off of the setback right now. So if we redraw the drainage easement, is that going to affect the setback?
So the setback is measured from the property line, not the drainage easement.
Okay.
The drainage and utility easement says that you can't put any structures inside of it. So it's.
It
but
does not affect them.
But it does not change the setback.
Okay. Second question is, and it's a question rather than a statement, could potentially accessory buildings be placed on that additional 2 acres? Is that conforming as far as the access to it and everything that you see? Could you put, within the laws, within the, the rules of grant, could you put accessory buildings on that piece of property?
It's 99 feet wide,
Right.
and it's how long? I can't, what is it, like 572? or is it
472.
472?
Yeah.
I can't even tell my glasses, I need glasses.
So
So-
the answer is technically yes.
Yes.
However, I was gonna say untechnically, but that is not a word. So the reality of the situation is that a accessory building could not be put into a drainage and utility easement, which covers a significant portion of that finger,
Right.
for lack of a better way of saying that, because the line, the drainage and utility easement would shift, obviously, for the 2 acres. Then if you look at there, you can kind of see there's a little dotted line that it goes, and actually I'm gonna go to the aerial because it's on there too. If you look at that blue line that cuts off the last third of the property, everything to the east of that is also in the drainage and utility easement. So you couldn't put a structure in the DNU. So you can do other things in a drainage and utility easement, but you cannot put a structure and you can't, affect the drainage pattern, if you will. So from that perspective, it would be very difficult. I'm hypothesizing.
Right, I understand. But,
If you could make it fit and you're outside of all the DNUs and you meet all the setbacks, technically, yes.
and you don't have to have road access to an accessory building?
No.
Okay.
You don't have to have frontage.
Okay, okay.
Because the lot itself has frontage.
Sir, I'm gonna stop you for just a moment, I have another council member, and hold that question for just a second. Tom?
And I believe any building that houses animals has to be 100 feet from the side setbacks, and there's no way you could put it in there. It's only 100 feet wide.
Yeah, there are greatly increased setbacks when you're dealing with livestock.
So there's no way it would go there.
Well,
Okay.
it would depend on the use of the building,
Right.
frankly.
Nothing for animals, is what I said.
Yeah, animals would not fit because those setbacks are much greater. No, go ahead, sir, we just wanted to make sure you understood that.
No, I just am asking because I'm a neighbor too now.
Yep.
Third question is, I pulled the conditional use permit on this house when I lived there for horses, and it explained to me 1 horse per 2 grazable acres, and they exclude the homestead, which meant 3 horses. That's what I pulled the permit, so I know that as a matter of fact. Could you explain to me what's excluded as far as the homestead when you look at number of horses on a piece of property? Because we were told we could have 3.
Okay. Do you remember the hard surface? As I remember, the homestead is counted as half an acre on that, if
One.
I'm not mistaken.
Thought it was one.
Did we go all the way up to
It's
one?
1,
I
it was
believe it's
1.
1 acre.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if it's 1, then you've got one animal unit, so horse in this
Right.
case, per 2 grazable acres.
Right.
But as Jennifer was sort of going around, that can be a bit of an involved process because it depends on what the land is categorized at in terms of its, the water which covers it, which does or does not cover it. So your circumstances at that time, when you pulled that CUP, and I don't know what date that was, may be different from the circumstances which confront us now.
So the 1 acre that your homestead is on, has that changed?
Okay. I don't believe so.
So on 8.5 acres today, we have 7.5 acres of usable land for horses, which would mean 3 horses, correct?
That would again depend upon whether or not that land had the classifications of DNR water sources that make it non-grazable. There are certain,
Well,
there's,
could there be more than 3 horses based on what you've just told me?
on the.
Today?
On the 7 acres?
Yes.
There, go ahead, Jennifer.
All I was gonna say is I would caution you to,
Yeah, this
from the
is
standpoint
very-
of,
Yeah.
we don't have the conditional use permit in front of us today.
Yeah.
And number two, this request is not it's not about the conditional use
Well,
permit.
and I agree with that. I just want to know moving forward, because today there's 4 horses on this piece of property that are grazing on this 3-acre property, on this 3-horse property. So I'm just wondering, when we go to 10 acres, are we gonna have 6 horses there? Are we gonna have 10 horses there? And I think that, it's something that the city has to, I don't want a police state, but I think if there's rules, they have to be enforced. I lived with 3 horses because that's the CUP I pulled. There haven't been 3 horses there since I moved. This is the second owner since I've sold this property. I actually live on this street too, so I have a concern, if I want to put horses on, how are the rules going to be applied to me? So if it's 1 acre for a homestead and that's cut and dried, then we have 3 horses on this property. If there are other rules that I'm not aware of, I guess that's why I'm asking you or the council, just so we understand.
But-
And I'm
I
done.
see it, Tom.
Yeah.
Wait for him to get done talking there. Go ahead, Tom.
No, I'm done. Those are my 3.
But we're gonna have our council person weigh in on this as long as you're here. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so anyway, there's a chart sitting behind Jennifer of all the wetlands. Those are available, and we did a lot on the grazable acres, so that was talked about a lot. So the chart determines basically what those, and I think we broke it off above class 2. And then you can figure out on your own kind of how many grazable acres. It's not an exact science, just so you know. But to your point, yeah, I mean, the rules should be followed. I mean, we have the standards. It's just, usually we don't get into this, and as Jennifer said, I'm not talking about any more than that. Just want to point out, we do have a chart over there, and those are available from, the watershed? Where did we get a stack of those
That's
at one time?
DNR.
That was that place down in Stillwater. It wasn't the DNR, it was some watershed. So those are available if you want a reference on what
The
they are.
wetland types, got it, okay.
Yeah, so basically what Jennifer's saying was, and what I'm going to reiterate for everyone here is, the application that we have in front of us takes 2 acres and it appends it to another property. Should those horse numbers change and the current owners come to the city for a CUP in order to, or other types of permissions in order to change those horse numbers, that's when this discussion would be much more fully gone into, because as Jennifer has wisely pointed out, I don't have the documents in front of me. I don't know what I'm looking at in terms of the water holding capacity of the land and how it's holding that water right now. So there's too many questions. What I do have in front of me is an application that has been properly explained and vetted by our staff. And from my perspective, again, it looks as though this application should be moving forward based upon its merits, from my perspective. Sir, did you want to step up, please? Please. And if I could have you sign in and then introduce yourself, please.
I'm Brad Niderson. My wife and I own the property to the west of along Lake Elmo. As is this, our neighborhood, our division, is the zoning is it A1? And what does that mean? And I'm wondering if the addition of this other 2 acres will change the zoning.
Jennifer, would you like to discuss the zoning real quickly?
Sorry. That was a very big bug.
Get attacked.
That was awkward. Okay. So, no, So our A1 and our A2 zoning districts essentially cover the vast majority of the community. Both of them are very similar in terms of the regulations. This does not change the zoning, does not require it to be zoned A2 or it's consistent with A1. So the zoning stays the same. The property is A1 today, it will be A1 tomorrow.
Yep.
And A1, I guess I'm,
We have very, and I don't mean to interrupt, but we have very exhaustive descriptions of both A1, A2, and our other categories, both on our website, and we have paper copies of that as well. But do you have specific
I
questions
guess
on how
we're
this is
we're
gonna-
residential, right? Is it considered residential or is it considered residential ag? And,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Jennifer, residential ag on this.
So the intent of the A1 is described as essentially permitting large-scale agricultural uses, as well as rural residential uses. So originally, A1 was established as a means to permit commercial farming operations to continue, essentially, and to coexist with rural residential uses. So that is still really what A1 is defined as. A2 was defined as actually still permitting agricultural uses and farming uses, but on a smaller scale. But again, with rural residential uses. So they're very similar in terms of what the intent of them is established as, but A1 was really geared more at making sure that the sort of right to farm, the commercial ag operations, et cetera, that can sometimes be considered as maybe noxious when next to rural residential uses, was basically saying, no, we embrace this and this is an important part of our communities.
And it was
So-
part of the right to farm
Right.
movement, if you will.
so I guess getting to the point with, I think we and a number of the neighbors have concerns about with added property, with more horses. I know, or the neighbor, I guess concerns about more of a riding stable. Would that be another permit, or to have, say, events there, or where we have more traffic?
All those types of uses that you're describing right now, that you've just described, would, again, because I'm not going to speculate based
Yeah.
upon what I have in front of me, would require different permits and different applications to come through
Okay.
the city and its staff. So those would require very different things if that were under consideration.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
And Jennifer, please, before you go,
Yeah,
sir.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to add one piece of information to this, just because I know it can be somewhat confusing when someone
Please.
says, the purpose of why I'd like this additional 2 acres is X, right? The reality is, we have to look at them as sort of two separate questions, 2 separate requests. There's the subdivision request, which is what we have before us this evening. If and when they would want to add horses, if it goes beyond what's permitted within the ordinance, then that trips either amending the conditional use permit that exists on the property, if they're not consistent with the conditional use permit, or it requires a whole new conditional use permit if one doesn't already exist. So when an application for a minor subdivision is made, we don't say, oh, and by the way, what other permits would you like to have to go along with this? So it's, if the subdivision complies with our ordinance, then that's the prerogative of the applicant to request the minor subdivision. If they choose to want to do things beyond that related to use later, then we look at the applicable section of the code and process that application the way it needs to be processed. So tonight, this does not approve more horses. That's not what tonight does. Tonight simply approves or denies the transfer of 2 acres from one property to another.
Yeah, any other change not falling within that, as Jennifer has adroitly pointed out, would trigger more permitting, more applications, that type of thing, as Jennifer has explained. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. Hopefully we answered your questions. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Very good. Can I have a motion to close the public hearing? It looks like we're done.
I would so move.
And a second.
Second.
And all those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, discussion among council. Gentlemen, Tom?
No, I mean, I think I said it before. I mean, it's, as Jennifer said, this is an application for a lot split, and it seems to meet the spirit of our ordinances, and that's what we're here to vote on, and it looks good to me.
Real good. Denny?
Yep, no questions.
Mr. Giefer?
No questions.
John?
No questions, sir.
Very good. And again, the concerns that I've heard tonight during our public hearing are heard and understood. And I think our planner has, once again, explained this extremely well in terms of what we are prepared to do based upon the information that we have in front of us today. Now, should that information change, should new information come forward, new requests come forward, then that could trigger different things. And at that point, we would make a judgment based upon what we have in front of us, provided by our professional staff, and we'd make decisions at that point.
Mr. Mayor and council
Please.
members, I will add to the
Yes.
members in the audience, if an application came in to do something different, another public hearing will be held.
That's true.
Notices will go out, so.
Yep, once those uses change, more public hearings are triggered as well, as that's part of the process. So that would be part of it.
Thank you, Kim.
Yes, thank you very much, Kim. So, it sounds as though we understand the situation at this point, gentlemen.
I'd like to make a motion.
Kim's got her hand up.
Oh, sorry,
Mr.
we're
Mayor,
missing,
council members,
we're missing her again.
if in fact a motion does come through, it would be a motion to approve the resolution as amended, because one change was made to the
Did
condition.
Jennifer change that one? Yep, that's right, so as amended. Jeff, if you would like to continue with that, Jeff?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve this as amended.
And do I have a second on this?
Second.
All right, so City of Grant, Minnesota Resolution Number 2019-14, proposed and seconded to be approved as amended. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you very much, gentlemen. It has been approved. Thank you. Moving forward on our agenda, City Attorney Dave Schneider has no action items. We will move directly to new business, which is the City Council meetings from June 27, 2019. Councilmember Rogg, if you would please abstain on the vote on these minutes, and I will entertain a first to approve these minutes.
Also move.
And do I have a second on that?
Second.
Very good. All those in favor of approving the minutes from June 27th, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And we have an abstain. There is no unfinished business. Discussion items, staff updates. I'd ask the staff to update us on anything that's happening around town or legal or otherwise that you'd like to tell the council about. Dave, anything you'd like to update us on?
No, thank you, Mayor and Council.
Very good. And I'll ask our treasurer, our planner, and our clerk. Very good. Thank you. City council reports. Gentlemen, anything that you would like to talk about in terms of happenings in the city or things you see in the future, things you'd perhaps like to add to the next agenda? Doesn't sound like it. Very good. We are right into our community calendar. Mr. Rogg, I would ask you to read our community calendar for us, please.
Yes, sir. So, the Matamidi Public Schools Board meeting, Thursday, August 8th and 22nd at the Matamidi District Education Center at 7 p.m. Stillwater Public Schools Board meeting, Thursday, August 8th at the Stillwater City Hall at 7 p.m. And the Washington County Commissioners meeting, Tuesdays at the Government Center at 9 a.m.
Thank you very much. I'd ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting, please.
So move.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, thank you very much. We are done.